Welcome to this part 2 broadcast on a series entitled What is Love? As I'm looking at the different facets of love and God's intent for love to be a powerful work in our life. If you haven't checked out part 1, be sure to look at that and to listen to it or watch it, whichever way you prefer, and let it just wash over your heart and let it invite you into a deeper experience of what God's love can be and how you see him, how you see yourself, and how you interact with others. I'm bringing out some important facets of what love is. And if you're a child of the 80s moving into teenage years in the 90s, you might say, "What is love?" Okay, got that out of my system. But in all seriousness, we're looking at the multifaceted aspect of the word love. I mentioned in part 1, like looking at a beautiful diamond, we're learning to discover God's love. And just as you look at that beautiful diamond in one facet, you turn the diamond and you now get a glimpse of another beautiful aspect. And so I want to invite you to just continue to grow deeper and deeper. Love is very simple in how we can experience it. It's very fundamental, but it's also just when you take a dive in, you're just beginning. We're always learning, always growing. So I'm praying that as I share these things about love, it will enhance your healing and freedom journey, that you just sense grace, God's amazing power, inviting you to just walk with him deeper and what it means to be loved. And folks, we're all on a journey of learning. So allow yourself to learn, allow yourself to heal. And in it, I know great blessing and great fruit will come out of it in your life. Now, the first point I mentioned, and I spent a lot of time surrounding it, was sharing about how, number one, love moves us towards someone in relationship. Today, I want to move into another aspect of love. And at first, you might go, wait, you might need to explain this some more. I need to learn some more about this. Well, buckle up, because what I want to share, number 2, is that love involves a strong relationship affection for another. We cannot ignore the realization that love involves affection. Yes, I'm going to start talking about your emotions, and we're going to start navigating the emotional world of love. Love has a connection to our affection. What we love, we have affection for. And what we cultivate affection for is where our love gets directed. Affection is a word that shows the emotional expression that takes place towards those we love. Wherever you direct love, affection becomes a way that love is expressed. Affection can be given by a certain look, a word, or even a nurturing touch. Now, I'm going to say this right up front. Many people were raised without affection, or maybe the opposite, where there was a lot of violence or harshness or even abuse. So their definition of love often misses the reference for what loving affection is. Many cultures have affection absent for generations. So there's very little understanding of the power of affection, yet it is involved in love. So we have to understand it can be challenging to consider God as a loving, affectionate father who has affection towards his children when we have zero reference for what that even is like in our own lives. It's like we're learning a foreign language and we don't even know what one word means. It feels so foreign to us in our references. So let me ask you this question. Was affection a part of your upbringing? Because this will form whether or not you're comfortable with the emotional, affectionate aspect of love. Yes, I'm going to get into emotions, and we're going to talk about emotions, and I'm going to do my best to bring some balance and some soundness in the discussion. But I first want to ask you, was affection a part of your upbringing? Did you have it in relation with your parents? Did you have it in your family and your home life growing up? Did you experience that? Did you hear words of nurture, comfort, and kindness? Was there a healthy sense of touch where you were hugged on a regular basis, held even kissed as a young child in ways that brought you healthy comfort? Did you grow up experiencing the power of affection? If the answer is yes, then you may be more comfortable understanding in some ways how love has affection. Remember, number one, love moves us towards another person, but it also involves an affection towards someone, a pure affection. So the honest answer to this question will help impact from here where your journey may have led you when it comes to love. Because if you're comfortable receiving true love, then there is an aspect where you will be comfortable with affection. In my journey and experience in my own life and in helping others, there is a great battleground in people where they've not experienced loving, nurturing affection. So then this kind of leads into a classic question, and I'd like to dive right into it. Is love an emotion? And if I was to ask this question to Christians, I would get a variety of responses. Many would honestly say, I don't know. Many would say, no, definitely not. And for a variety of reasons, and I would understand, you may be surprised at my answer. But I want to start off with a statement, and then I'll move into explaining and diving deeper. Yes, love does involve your emotions. But I'm not just going to leave that statement there and move on. It needs context. It needs some explanation. It needs some added insight to give some depth to this. Now, Christianity at times has been so afraid of emotions. Come on, let's just be honest. We've had many different ditches that people get stuck in, and sometimes we've taught people to just live an emotionless existence. And there's a lot of problems with that. But we were worried that emotions could lead people into deception, could lead them into bondage. But in the midst of trying to prevent that, we forgot. At the end of the day, we're still relational beings that connect, and emotions are a part of relationship connection. You don't have a real relationship without some kind of emotionally connected exchange. In fact, I'm going to take this even further. All our thoughts, and for some of you, this may be an important realization, all our thoughts have corresponding emotions connected to them, attached to them. You don't think without an emotion. Every thought you have has a corresponding emotion connected to it. You can try to avoid emotions, but emotions are the musical score to our thoughts. You have a thought, and the emotion brings the musical score. Like music to a movie, emotion brings the mood of the score to that thought. Emotions lead us into how we interpret our thoughts, how the meaning we give to them. You may have a thought. It's not the thought. It's your interpretation that then leads into what you do with that thought, how you relate to it, how you process it. Well, the emotional aspect to it is often what causes us to react a certain way to that thought. Are you following me so far? With every thought, an emotional association arrives with it. It's the emotional connection that determines what we do with a certain thought. So developing our emotions takes maturity. So how do we mature in our emotions? I know I've needed it, and I know certainly you need it, but how do we find that maturity? Well, it's found when we are taught. Maturity is experienced when we are taught, equipped, and nurtured in how to deal with them. And many times I ask people, who taught you how to deal with your emotions? And so many honestly say, you know what? I wasn't. It's so important, yet the equipping wasn't there. And it's such a big part of our life. In fact, the truth is we all need to learn how to mature our emotional world so that we know how to deal with our affections, to enjoy the power of love. Love is meant to be an enjoyable, relational, and yes, even emotional experience. There's delight in it. There's joy in it. There's pleasantries that are in it, beautiful experiences that are in it, but we have not been equipped modeled and shown how to deal with our emotional internal world. I would make the argument that learning to process relationships and our emotions is one of the most important things we need to learn as Christians, yet it is often areas that are just put in the corner for maybe a psychologist, or put in the corner for counselors, or maybe just one little facet, when really emotions, relationships surround everything that we do. In fact, one of the great markers, think about this for a second, one of the great markers of spiritual maturity is found in what Paul called the fruit of the Spirit, right? We talk about, well, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If you pause and really think about it for a moment, these words are character traits that are emotionally exchanged. They are demonstrated through a person's emotional faculties. These are signs of emotional growth and maturity. The more you and I grow in Christ, the more we manifest these markers. If not, we can just become more legalistic. We become like the Pharisees. Maybe we have certain positions. There's certain things we've memorized. There's certain classes we've taken, certain achievements we've had, certain degrees we carry, certain accomplishments we can put on our resume, but we don't carry the fruit of the Spirit. And that shows we're missing the real pathway of maturity. You can't detect the fruit of the Spirit in some written test. You watch it in someone's life. And how do you watch it? You observe it, you experience it. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, you feel it when you're around them. When you're around them, you emotionally taste of that fruit. I know people in my history, in my experience, where I've said, man, that person is so kind. I remember when I had a medical appointment and I was talking to the doctor that was facilitating the appointment. And it was just a very, very great meeting appointment. And I said, I just appreciate your kindness. That means a lot as I'm navigating this journey. Sometimes I'll go through the drive-thru and someone's just kind to me. And it's a simple thing. You might just take your coffee or take whatever it is you're ordering and just drive on life. I don't know. I just appreciate when someone's kind because I've experienced so many unkind experiences like you have. What did I do? In that moment, I felt the emotional exchange of kindness. And see, this is the deposit that means the most in people's lives. When you're manifesting the fruit of the Spirit. Our goal in Christian growth has not been the metrics that matter. We point to all these things, and really what God is leading us into when it comes to healing and maturity is that each day I become more loving, and people sense that when they're around me. I'm more joyous, and my joy is contagious. That I have peace, that when people are around me, they sense that peace, and many times they don't want to leave because they're just sensing the peace I carry. My ability to long suffer, to hang in there with someone, to be able to still be present in relationship, to hang in there even through the difficult times, to manifest kindness. The Bible talks about how love is patient, love is kind. I'll get to that in future broadcasts, but I've talked about some of that already in the pillars of what love brings to us. Goodness, faithfulness. These are things that are felt. And Christianity has been avoiding emotions and feelings. Feelings are bad, feelings are bad, feelings are bad. And I get it. Trust me, I get it. I've seen emotions go in all kinds of crazy directions. But it doesn't negate the original design that God wanted us to be fruitful, emotional beings. When you're around someone who walks in the fruit of the Spirit, you see it and sense it in them. Notice that first on the list, right at the front, is love. So I hope I'm encouraging you to realize that God wants to be involved in your emotional, relational world. It's his primary area of discipleship, of maturing you. Now he loves you and he receives you right where you are. I've talked about that in the last broadcast. He is wanting to walk with you and let you experience his healing love. And as a result, it matures you deeper in how you do relationships. When you interact with God's love, you can't help but upgrade how you see yourself, how you see others. His love changes how we see everything. And he invites us relationally to grow in the fruit of the Spirit. But we have to learn to be okay with processing through our emotional world. You can suppress emotions, you can run from emotions, but they're there nonetheless. And many people, yes, they struggle with their affections, and certain affections come into certain pathways and they don't know what to do and they feel out of control. It's an invitation that we need greater mentoring, healing, and maturity in what pure affection can be in our lives, to let it be what it was designed to be. So can we just make a decision? We're going to face this and deal with it. Join in with me. Yeah, I know it can get uncomfortable at times. And listen, we're all goofy in certain areas of our life, so it's all right. Now, if I was to look at your emotional world with a microscope, now, prayerfully a loving, gracious microscope, right? I would actually be able to see the themes of discipleship that God is cooking up in your life, because they usually involve your relational world, how you relate to God, how you relate to how you see yourself, and how you relate to the world around you, because that, folks, is true discipleship. It's not how much you know, how much you can quote. Not that those things are wrong, but we make the metrics of maturity things that we shouldn't. Because when I grow, I relate to God more fruitfully. I see myself the way he sees him, and I interact with others more powerfully. We often think of discipleship as like taking a class, taking a course, going through a curriculum, memorizing something, or being able to quote certain passages, or furthermore, winning arguments, or being able to present ourselves in ways that look spiritually smart. While Bible literacy is very, very important, the scriptures are meant to lead you into greater relationship with God, into greater depth of connection with him, and improve how you do relationships with others. But relational depth is not complicated, that you learn these complex things that make people's minds spin. Actually, the deeper you go with God, the simpler it becomes. You become more foundational and fundamental. Everything narrows down to the simplicity of the gospel, the simplicity of his love, and learning to grow in the righteousness and fruit of the Spirit of God. The fruit of the Spirit increases. Your emotional world, as you give it to God and let him walk with you in it, you start to realize what you need. Your relationships with others, they bring out those areas, right? Those areas that fire off. You don't have to be a theologian or genius to know and to discern where God is discipling you. Just observe the areas of life that irritate you the most, the areas that fire off, the troubling, the things that just get under your skin. Those battlegrounds reveal areas of your life where God's just going, I want to be more a part of that area of your emotional world. And I want to heal, because there's areas that need healing. They need my tender affection. They need my loving care. And in that, we learn to renew, to transform, to enter into greater freedom. We have to recognize this. So, back to your emotions. Love is something that must be experienced. So, of course, it impacts our emotions. We got to learn it's okay to navigate emotions. God is teaching us how to mature. Because, folks, we're not robots. We're human beings made to feel and connect to the relational power of love. You're a relational being, and emotions are part of that. So therefore, we need help and maturing in it. Many do not know how to give and receive love effectively because they were not taught how to navigate their emotional life, and they weren't modeled healthy relationship. They have no idea what to look for. Many upbringings have very little mentoring and equipping on how to deal with how you feel. So let me ask you the question. Do you remember having a parent or a loved one ask you, it's a simple question, how you feel? How are you feeling? How are you doing? How did that make you feel? Do you have record of that as a continual work in your life? Furthermore, do you remember them talking with you through those emotions? I'm not saying, how do you feel? Well, I'm scared. Well, don't be scared. Okay, what's for dinner? That's not working through anything. Working through those emotions so you can find healing, growth, and maturity. Come on, let's just be honest. Most of us just say no to that. No, not much. Maybe once. Maybe there was one moment. And there are moments. The funny thing is, I remember them so crystal clear, so vivid, because my heart needed it and needed so much of it. But we didn't get it. And God's available and here to renew that and teach us. But you got to recognize your emotions are a part of your every moment in life. Every single moment you are responding to an emotional perception. So why aren't we being equipped to identify them and manage them? No wonder love and heart connection can be so challenging, and no wonder our bookstores are flooded with books on relationships and thoughts and thinking, are all pointing to our history that we weren't equipped. Or maybe you're just somebody, you're just kind of afraid of emotions. Are you afraid of emotions? Now, in Christianity, this can be a common thing, but it's a common thing in general. Many people fear their emotions take over and can lead them into dangerous places. As a result, they can dismiss emotions altogether. They have a fear their desires will get off track. For many, they've created a shutoff. And so this shutoff has disconnected them from the experience of true love their heart was designed for, because they kind of just shut off any emotional heart awareness. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And so some Christians can freak out when the subject of emotions or feelings come up. They have an assumption. It automatically leads to emotionalism and looking for that good feeling as the definition of love. I want to say this up front. I understand that. I understand that concern. There are some things we need to learn as we delve deeper into the power of love, though. Because yes, love does involve your emotional capacity. But love does not mean that you are dictated by every emotional pull that comes your way. What you need, what I need, is maturity. Learning how to handle the various waves of emotions that flow through us in our life. I need help in the sea of emotions to learn how to navigate. And many of us have been thrown into the ship of the sea of emotional world with no training on how to navigate a ship. No compass and no training on how to utilize the resources of that ship. And so I'm praying that this will be an invitation for you to keep growing in it, to know, to be compassionate. Hey, I wasn't equipped, but I want to learn. Now, the reason, I'll say this again, the reason many believers don't know how to navigate is they weren't equipped. So they're left with an emotional immaturity that disempowers their ability to mature in love, to grow in love. Many of you are raised by emotionally immature parents. So their lack of equipping left you ill-equipped, and generation after generation repeats the cycle until someone says, you know what? No, I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I want to pass the baton on to the next generation. I want to pass on a greater understanding of how to live heart connected and how to live more healed and free. Because when you're emotionally immature, you don't even know how to make sense of certain thoughts and certain emotions. I know in my journey of anxiety, panic attacks, and OCD, I didn't know how to interpret anything. And those who have OCD tendencies, it's rough when you've not been equipped in love to know how to even make sense of intrusive thoughts that come your way and how to even navigate the feelings that come out of some of the crazy, goofy thoughts that come your way. But I want to say this, is that whether you've been diagnosed with a mental health issue or not, you're just realizing you need to grow in love. We all need to mature. And some of it starts with realizing we weren't equipped. Because as I mentioned in the last broadcast, love is something, and I used Paul's writing in Ephesians, is something that roots us and grounds us. The roots go deeper, and we get more grounded. And so that's what God's love wants to do, is help ground and stabilize your emotional life. The love of God teaches us how to steward our affection. God's love first, it settles us in relationship. Okay, you're connected. You're with me. I'm not going to leave you. I'm here with you. I'll always be here with you. We don't have to panic because we have goofy thoughts, feelings, and emotions that flow through us because God's leading us on a journey. Step by step, we're learning what love means. We're on a journey, not a quick fix. And the experience of love is so powerful because it necessitates we learn to get rooted. We learn to get grounded. It can be so easy to take the potent emotions that love brings out and apply them in immature ways. So we're learning to mature. And some of that is in our emotional world, realizing that love is not defined by an emotional rush. Love is not lust. I'll talk about that more in future broadcasts. Love is not defined by a high. You can't measure love by a dopamine chemical rush in your body alone. Unfortunately, for centuries, love has been seen through the lens of a euphoric experience, and we chase that. And the more broken we are, the more we chase the euphoric experience. This endless chase reveals the lack of being rooted, grounded, and matured in love. When Paul the Apostle was fathering the church in Corinth, he brought out this pattern. There was all kinds of craziness going on in this church. And he had to bring a lot of instructions. And he said to them in 2 Corinthians 6:12, honest statement, you're not restricted by us. Listen, you're not under bondage by what we're saying. You're not being controlled or, put under a heavy yoke by us. You are restricted by your own affections. He brought out that you follow your affections wherever they take you. You're very emotional, and it's great because you know how to express. You're very passionate. There's a lot of fire in the church of Corinth. And Paul had to come in, and he didn't squelch the fire. He didn't say, get rid of your emotions. No, what he did was he taught them how to navigate their emotional world. Now, in this passage, the word affections here, it speaks of the bowels, the place of inner passion. Many times, both in the Old and New Testament, there's this sense of that inner place. It's like compared to your gut or your stomach or your bowels or your intestines. It's like that deep place within, right? If I could use a modern phrase, it could mean being driven by your gut. We're so driven by our gut, that gut feeling. I don't know, my gut was telling me this. I'm just following my gut. Well, I had to learn what's influencing my gut. Because for many years in my life, I didn't realize my quote unquote gut was being driven by fear. And I would listen to it. It became my master. For many people, their gut is driven by addiction. And they're just looking for that high. Many people, their gut is driven by obsession and compulsion. Many is driven by just chronic worry, and they always follow the worry. Or maybe your gut is driven by foreboding. You're always waiting for the hammer to drop and the hammer to fall, and your traumas and pain of the past enhance that, and they stack up things, right? And Paul is saying here, no matter what we say, at the end of the day, you're just going to follow your gut. And your gut needs some course correction. They were going to be driven by their emotional world of affections that were immature. They were trained to follow all this stuff that flowed through them. And what they needed was they needed fathering. They needed mentoring. If you find yourself following every wind of emotion and affection that appears, it's just a sign love needs to become more deeply rooted and grounded in your emotional life. When I realized that, it helped me a lot. Don't beat yourself up about it. Trust me, we all need it. I'll tell you this, I remember when I first got married, I thought I knew what love was, but once I got married, I actually learned how little of love I really knew. I actually realized how selfish I was, how many areas of my life lacked love. And I didn't use that to beat myself up in shame. I used it as an invitation. It's time to learn, Mark. It's time to roll up your sleeves. Wherever you are in your battle, it's time for you to roll up your sleeves and let the love of God have a deeper work. It's okay. God was leading me, is continuing to lead me, and he's leading you into an invitation, a deeper understanding of what his pure, true love is. And folks, we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more. And for so many of us, he uses various contexts. He uses your family, your marriage, your parenting. He uses your friendships. He uses your entire relational grid as the incubator for healing and maturing your emotional world. Now, let's pop over to James, because James had to address this issue too in his writings. He noticed the believers he were instructing, they were lost in their emotions. If you think your world is dysfunctional and chaotic, his community was like the wild, wild west. I mean, there's all kinds of craziness happening. I'm going to read it right here. Look at what happens when emotions and affections are immature and it's lived out. He says in James chapter 4, verse 1, I'm using the King James here because it accurately brings out the word lusts. So forgive me for the yees and and all that's in there. From whence, from whence, there's the King James. From whence come wars and fightings among you. So there's a lot of fighting. He's saying wars here. Come they not even of your lusts that war in your members. This is bringing a realization that people have lust, not love. Lust is driving their decisions. He's getting right to the core here. He says, you lust and you have not. You kill. This is some powerful language here. There's some killing going on. When you think your neighborhood's crazy, you think your church is dysfunctional, and desire to have and cannot obtain, you fight and you war. That you have not because you ask not. And you ask and receive not because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lusts. Let's talk about lust for a second. I'll talk about it more in future broadcasts. Lust is a counterfeit to love. But wherever there is lust, it reveals an area where love needs to have a deeper work. The modern word for lust is addiction. We live in a world driven by addiction. You could look here and say, do not these fights and wars come about because of your addictions? You have addictions and you kill others for it. You have not because you ask not, because you spend it on your addictions. And you have to realize that Satan is the father of lies, but Jesus called Satan also the father of lusts. When he confronted the Pharisees, he said, you said the religious people of that day, you're following the lusts of your father, the devil. Many people struggle, say, I have so much lust in my life. It's okay. God's here to heal you. But you can't heal lust by just chasing lust as a symptom. You've got to get to the deeper issue. It's an absence of love. It's an absence of what love means in your life. And you know what? It's a journey of changing fathers. Because when we feed lust, we're listening to the father of lust, who's telling us that you'll find life if you follow that lust. And the more we do it, the more we become addicted to it, conditioned to it, but we never solve the emptiness that's there. And so God has us on a journey of changing daddies, of moving from the father of lies, the father of lust, to the father of love, the father of light, who wants to invite you into relationship. And James is saying here, these addictions, these lusts are the counterfeit of love. So instead of coming together, you're fighting, you're warring, and you're never satisfied. You will even go to the point of killing because these desires are just burning and burning and burning, and you're not turning to the true love. And so what happens is you have these burning lust, these desires, and you can't seem to obtain. You're chasing something and you never arrive. You battle and you war. And here's the thing, you don't ask. So you don't bother asking, he says. But when you do, what are you asking? When you pray, so what happens is you don't go to God with your needs because you struggle with connecting to his love. And then when you do, you just spend your requests on lust. God, help me to get this goal. Help me to get the thing you're craving. You're bringing God into it. And he says, when you ask amiss. It's like your target's off. You can't see straight because why? Well, the same thing that Paul said. You're not restricted by what's being told to you. You're being restricted by your own gut, which is being driven by lust. So today, God's inviting you to mature into love and out of lust. Now, for many, you may get lost in your affections. You may feel yourself saying, but Mark, this is just the way I feel. I can't help the way I feel. I hear you. I understand. I understand what that's like. I understand when you're going through that and you're overwhelmed. But the reality is that you must understand those who lack grounded references for what love really is. You have to understand you're often looking for the rush or the super feel-good feeling as confirmation of love. But using this as a primary gauge, it's going to keep you stuck in immaturity. If we keep chasing that feeling, chasing that definition of love, not only are we going to look for love in all the wrong places, the love that we're actually looking for is not love in the first place. Because the reality is too often we confuse infatuation, obsession, addiction, or lust with love. And we're learning what true love is. While you may experience an exciting rush in a love relationship, this is not the foundation, nor does it define what love looks like in the long term. True love endures when the rush seems to be no longer present. Maybe the infatuation or maybe the emotional connection of the high or the feel good, maybe it's just not there in the moment. It begins to feel like it's dissipating, and some people interpret this as something, but really it's time to mature. The love of God is meant to mature us in our sonship, in our daughterhood. A good father compassionately meets you where you are, but leads you into maturity. Many people don't receive this invitation, and they spin for a lifetime searching for that continual rush which never satisfies. Now, with all that said, love still involves our emotional capacity. It does involve our affections. Many people are uncomfortable with affection. They didn't receive it growing up, so a nurturing touch or a gentle gesture can seem very foreign to them. Masses of people in the world lack pure nurturing affection, so they only think of physical touch in a sexual way. That's often what we see in the world we live in. They don't have a reference for the power of just a simple, pure, loving hug, an embrace, or someone's arm or kind touch on our arm. Today, we're in a desperate need for pure affection, and our lusts, our addictions, and uncontrollable urges are a clear sign. We need loving affection like never before. I'll be honest with you, when interacting with people in coaching sessions on a one-on-one basis and interacting with those who view my content, my heart aches with the pain, emptiness, and suffering that people have faced and are facing. And yes, there's many things I give as feedback and coaching and help, but I've got to be honest, the thing that bubbles up so much with so many people that I'm interacting with is you need a hug. I've felt this over and over again. I just see the absence of affection. You just need an embrace. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to do these 19 steps or 45 habits. What you need is you need a hug. Your heart is crying out for love. It's crying out for the affection and nurture you didn't receive, the comfort that love brings that says you're going to be okay. Folks, our anxieties, our obsessions, our panic, our depression, our neurotic tendencies to see everything negative, we overreact, we hyperanalyze, we live hypervigilant, guarding ourselves, we react to every thought and emotion that comes our way, we develop these distorted interpretations, we feel all over the place in our moods. What we desperately need is a genuine hug, a series of hugs, a connection to affection that reminds us, I'm going to be okay. Now, allow me to transition this into how you relate to God by asking you this question: are you able to connect to the affection that God has for you? It's tough to answer this, right? We're trying to connect to an invisible God. Well, as far as the five physical senses are concerned, he's invisible. He's a spirit. We won't see him with the five physical senses. But we're trying to make sense of him having affectionate love towards us and connecting to that. And sometimes, to be honest, I've struggled with this aspect of God loving me because, I got to be honest, many times I felt that God just tolerated me. And in other ways, I feel like he loved me because he had to. Well, I got to love Mark because, I'm supposed to. But in the depth of my journey, just being open to learning and learning about this affection, I began to realize God loves me. God has affection towards me. And I discovered a deeper aspect of this hidden within the depths of the Old Testament of all places. In Zephaniah, tucked into the 3rd chapter is this expression that I had to pause and really take in. For some reason, I just never noticed it. And one day it just really struck my heart. Zephaniah 3:17, the Lord your God in your midst. It just connected me to his presence being here. The mighty one will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. This helped me to put some language and understanding of God's affection towards me. Because here you see it. He will rejoice over you with gladness. There's a gladness that he has, and he's excited over me. But it's not just one giant Holy Ghost party. There's also, he'll quiet me. He'll calm me. This is the nurture we're all dying to experience in our lives. I just want to know I'm going to be okay. There's that affection quieting us. And then there's a song that he's singing. Now, for many of you in your healing journey, maybe you ask yourself, what does it look like to know that God is rejoicing and he's glad over me? What does it look like to experience that quieting comfort of his love? Furthermore, what's the song that he's singing over you? Maybe an actual melody will come to mind. Maybe as you're journaling and writing, some lyrics will come to mind and you'll realize God is singing something for you, over you. I don't know. Who knows exactly what that looks like? But it's passages like this where I began to realize God doesn't just love me. He likes me. He likes being around me. He enjoys me. He's not just tolerating me and going, well, I got to love Mark, so I guess I have to. This helped me to realize in his perfect love, he doesn't tolerate me. He actually wants to be around me. He enjoys me. He's glad when he looks at me. He rejoices over me. In some translations, it says he delights over you with singing. He delights. I think for many of you taking in this broadcast, it is important to connect to the delight God has towards you. He enjoys you. Now, I'll be honest, Christians talk so much about loving difficult people in a way that's like, I got to love them. So in many ways, we communicate it like going to the dentist and getting your teeth pulled out. Like we have to do it, but we dread it, and we're just clawing the whole way through. And I'll be honest, I think that influenced how I saw God and how I felt God saw me. Meanwhile, he's celebrating over me, throwing a party over me. He delights in me. He loves me, but he also likes me. And his affection is toward me, not away from me. His affection is not being withheld from me, as many have experienced, where growing up, you get the silent treatment from your parents or the silent treatment from someone, or they withhold affection towards you or never give it in the first place. So our references needed healing. And for me, it took some time for me to learn to receive it. Now, because we struggle with affection, it can be easy for our affections to be pulled like a roller coaster, up and down in our moods, in our emotional world, or being pulled into various lusts, or pulled into distorted interpretations, and being pulled into so many directions, right? And our brokenness takes over. I found in the maturing process, in learning, God loves me. He likes me. I'm connecting more to that. I'm learning. But now I'm learning in my own life, out of my brokenness, how can I be empowered? I realized as I'm healing, I have to learn to set my affection. Or I could say, direct my affection. God freely loves us with perfect love. He has perfect love. I'm being perfected in that love. There's a lot of dysfunction, a lot of brokenness, sin that contaminates my reference for love. And so God freely loves us without sin interfering with his covenant affection towards you. He has no sin, therefore sin doesn't flow through him. You and I are pilgrims on a journey of learning to heal and overcome what sin has contaminated. In fact, one of the greatest areas that sin has polluted is how to give and receive love in a healthy way, in a pure way. What does it look like to have healthy, loving relationships and not all this dysfunctional that we find ourselves living in? So here's something to consider. In working through our healing journey, we have to hold on to our ability to set our affections. We get to choose what the target of our love will be. It's been my observation that most people have not been taught how to set their affection, to guide their affection, to watch over their affection. Therefore, we become easily overtaken by any wind of affection or feeling that comes our way. Without proper training, we can set our affections without proper training. What I meant to say, without proper training, we can let our affections drive us into destructive places. So I had to learn that affections are something you steward. If you keep feeding an affection into a certain direction, it will grow. But affections are meant to be directed. There's choice here. You are not meant to be a slave of whatever affection pops up. If you find yourself saying, I can't help myself, it's often a sign that deeper equipping in true love is going to help your heart learn to mature in how you steward your affections. It is true that where your love is targeted, that is where your emotions will flow. And if your emotions struggle at first, they will catch up. You invest your emotions towards a certain direction, that's where your love will build. That is why we need to actively choose where we set our emotions. I'll get into choice more in a moment and more in other materials as well too. But you and I need to learn to lead our hearts. We often say, well, follow your heart. Just follow your heart, right? Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. This isn't entirely wrong. I'm not throwing out the concept completely, but it needs depth. You are meant to live from your heart, but you must also determine what the guiding forces are that form what your heart goes after. A healthy heart in the love of God sets affection towards truth, towards righteousness. In other words, in a loving relationship with God, we learn to love what God loves. John instructed us in this because he knew it could be easy to get our affections wrapped up in what the world loves. So don't let your affections just go into autopilot. There is an intentionality of where we're directing it. He even mentioned in 1 John, he said, do not love the world or the things in the world. It's just a helpful understanding that, hey, the world, or the Greek word is cosmos. It's the system of belief that the world lives under. By the prince of the power of the air, it dictates it. Now, not loving the world it's more than just don't do bad things, because I think that's what we were taught growing up. The world does bad things, don't do bad things. I believe it's way deeper than that. Not loving the world is being aware of what the world sets its affection upon. Let's think about this for a moment. What does the world set its affection on? Achievement, addictions, lust, money, power, status. I'm sure you can name a few more. Well, John summed them up when he said, what's in the world? Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. Boom, covers it. They all lead to dead ends. But if our hearts don't get rooted in the Father's love for us, we're going to be easily prone to setting our affection to all these areas. If you notice a pull in those areas, it's an absence of the Father's love that's needed. You're needing him to fill that area of your life. So part of the journey is learning to set our affections. You and I will have all kinds of emotions that pull our affection in some way. So don't be afraid of it. It happens as a result of living in a fallen world and a world that chases fallen goals. The maturing journey that you and I have before us is, where are we going to set our affections? That is a decision you and I get to make each day. Now, let me take this further into another subject. Is it true that someone can truly fall into love? Because we're talking about affections and emotions. Can someone fall in love? Love. What a person means by that is they found themselves drawn in or overtaken into an initial emotional affection they had for someone, right? Usually this is kind of like how oftentimes we want a great dating relationship to start. This is the person of my dreams. Now, this isn't necessarily wrong in the right context, but it's only the initial stages. This is introduction. What is needed is a lot more development, maturity, and groundedness. Now, affection, it may begin with an emotion or feeling, but love is not sustained by waiting for emotions to arrive. And this is how many live by. They're waiting for that love to just overtake them because that initial infatuation kind of overtook them. But there wasn't anything to sustain. Their emotional capacity didn't know how to sustain, simply because our emotions can be influenced by many factors. A healthy emotional life does not respond to whatever pull the current emotion is saying. The ebbs and flows of life, sin, brokenness, immaturity, weariness, and limitations of our own strength can have a great impact on our emotional capacity in a given moment. Our initial love connections may have been influenced by an emotional connection or an initial draw to someone. But here's the thing. Love must be sustained in the long run by decision. And folks, that's why many marriages can have what is called the honeymoon phase. There seems to be a flow of some affection and connection with little, maybe not too much interference or resistance. Not everybody, but many times. But at some point, love gets tested. It's simply a sign that what love is in your life needs to be matured. Many people say, oh my goodness, that feeling is not there. Is something wrong? I don't know that it's something wrong. It actually maybe something is right. And that something is actually an invitation to grow into a deeper level of maturity of what love means. Time to go deeper, time for an upgrade, time for maturity. The problem with, quote, falling in love treats love as something that just happens to you and you just follow it. Like you have no choice, you have no decision. You're just a victim of what tackled you. So if you can fall in it, you can fall out of it. And it's not like something that flows and can get lost that easily. Love is something that gets deeper, stronger, and it's out of choice and decision. We all need to grow in that, don't we? Because love is going to be challenged in our life. And there's wars in our life going on. Those same wars that James talked about exist today. We're in a place where our love is flawed. It's always in development. God's love is perfect, complete, and always present. Yet our hearts are on a journey of working through the broken experiences and immature references we have that influence our definition of love. That's why I want to get to the next one, number 3. In order to mature in what love needs, what love means in our lives, we need to know the power of decision. Number 3, in what love is a decision. At the end of the day, what will sustain and help you mature in the beauty of love is the power of decision. Your God-given ability to choose. When you choose, you are the one that determines where you will set your affection, how you will feed your affection, and what affections you will invest in. Your emotions may go through ups and downs, but your overall course of life is guided by your decisions on where you will point the compass of your affections. What makes love so incredibly powerful is that you are the one that gets to choose to love. No one can do this for you. You don't have to love. No one can truly force you into love. You may at times feel you are forced to comply when being controlled by someone or manipulated into something with guilt. Because we lack a reference for love, we can become so vulnerable to a counterfeit called guilt. People can use guilt to control others. You can at times be put under the work of control, often reinforced by fear and guilt. But you can't be pressured to truly love. Someone can attempt to use force on you. They may even get you into compliance to act. But even then, they cannot dictate true love from you. At the end of the day, love says, I choose you. It is a decision. This is very empowering, isn't it? Because I take back my ability. I can decide every day where I'm headed. But it leaves a lot of room for vulnerability and pain, doesn't it? Because even God himself will not force you to love him. With all that he's laid out for you as an act of his eternal love, he knows you may not choose him. You may reject him. You may never choose to love him. He still chooses to love you. He still wants to be with you. But he will never violate your ability to choose. That is incredible. Within the power of love is your freedom to choose to receive him, but at the same time is your ability to reject him and to reject people. You experience this in life. People will choose to love you or not love you. It can be the greatest blessing, but also the domain of the greatest heartache known to man. In fact, I wrote a book called Exposing the Rejection Mindset because the pain of our relational experiences goes so deep into our root system. And God gave us the power to choose. You'll make your own choices when it comes to love. This is what makes love such a vulnerable subject. Alongside that power to love comes a massive possibility of choosing not to love. In fact, so much destruction of massive proportions has come out of decisions where people did not choose love or to be loving. When we watch sin, evil, and relationship destruction take place, we often ask God, why God? Why God? When in reality, what we're witnessing is the decisions of mankind to not walk in the love and ways of God. It actually aches his heart to witness mankind's rejection of his beautiful love and grace. But if he steps in and removes that ability to decide, he removes your ability to live with the liberty to choose and enjoy a relationship. You become a robot with no need for emotion, relationship, or connection. Now, because you were made for love and long for love, you need to know that you will choose to place your love somewhere. It doesn't just sit idle. It's going to go somewhere. Many times we get caught in directing our love to unhealthy, unfruitful places. You may have affections towards things that you know may be wrong. It is simply an example of affection headed in the wrong direction. Affection moving in the wrong directions is a sign that pure love needs to have a deeper, more fulfilling work. The good news is you can set your affection into a new direction. Isn't that good news? Isn't that great to know? Even though love expresses affection and involves emotion, we can choose where to direct love. We can choose what to feed when it comes to love. When you live by a life of choice, it sets the compass in your life for your emotions to follow. Every day, you and I get to choose what we love and feed on what we love. Love involves an act of the will. It's your decision. It's a hard decision. It says, I choose to love you, which means I choose to set my affection towards you. Many will say, I don't have that. This can mean a lot of things, but one implication is actually, I've turned off my loving affection towards this person. My heart is shut off from growing in love towards this person. Therefore, I have nothing to give. We don't realize that when we turn our hearts from cultivating affection towards someone, we can harden our hearts towards them. Please understand, none of this is talking about leaving a toxic or abusive relationship. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm addressing how we follow our distorted pathways of love. You can harden your heart to one person and open your heart to loving another person. You will choose who you'll love, and you'll choose who you'll not love, who you will not love. That's why a man can tell his wife, or a wife can tell her husband. A man, in a case of a man's example, who's having an affair, he says, I've fallen in love with another woman. He's basically saying, I've chosen to turn off my love towards you and turn my love towards turned my love on towards another woman. I've hardened my heart towards you and turned my affection towards another. You can't truly participate in adulterous action without hardening your heart towards your married relationship. And many don't believe this because we live as slaves to our affection. But each day, you and I have a choice. What to love, where we set our love, where we set our affections. That's the day-to-day journey. And I'm going to make a decision to love. I decide who I'll love, and I choose to love you. The good news is that the more I feed that choice, the more my heart in the long run comes into alignment with that decision. My feelings eventually follow firm decisions. My affections eventually follow where I set my affection. So look around at your relationships. Where do you choose to set your love? Now, if love is a struggle in your life, the first way you can recover it is by exercising your ability to choose. And if you struggle in your love relationship with God, you can exercise your ability to choose there. Experiencing love from God starts with choosing to accept and receive the love that he has for you. It takes time and practice, but it all starts with a decision. Our walk with God starts with a decision. You also need to know that you may struggle with connecting to God's love because you don't know how to receive love from him. And for so long, Christians have been seeking to love God without learning to acknowledge and receive the love he already has for them. Remember, I said last time, we love him because he first loved us. Just as love is a decision in what we choose to love, it also takes a conscious decision to receive love, to be loved, and allow love to have root in our hearts. I'm learning to come into agreement with what God says about me. And at first, it wasn't saying yes, but I made a decision to make that a yes. And over time, my faculties and emotions learned to come into agreement with the beauty of God's love. And I'm still on that journey. And many struggle because they don't see themselves as lovable. Their hearts are filled with rejection, abandonment, unworthiness, self-hate, shame, and fear. And this all seeks to block you from receiving. Do you relate to that? If so, there are amazing aspects of God's love you can experience in the days and months ahead. You can make a decision today. That's where it starts with. Don't wait for your emotions all of a sudden to line up. Don't wait for the affection to just land on you. You can decide. Now, in this series, so far, I've named 3. What aspects of love that I've mentioned so far are you needing to see more and more in your life experience? So I leave you with 2 questions in closing. Number 1, where does love need to be matured more in your life? Don't force it. Don't introspect. Don't guilt it. Don't beat yourself up. Let it bubble to the surface. In what I shared, where do you find the invitation to mature more in love? Write it down. Journal it. Share it with someone. Process, marinate on it. Now, secondly, it ties into the first question. Secondly, how can you activate the power of decision to decide, to choose where you will set your affection and allow love to flow? I want to empower your decision. I want to empower the freedom that's available for you to make that decision, move forward, and let your life manifest the fruit of that decision. And if it's a struggle at first, it's okay. God will meet you because you're carving a new path. You may have started off with no references, but now you're learning, and step by step, God will meet you in it. He's such a loving Father. And most of all, I pray that grace and love will just continue in your life, that you feel empowered. And I look forward to sharing more on this subject in the next broadcast on what is love. And I pray that you'll experience just greater healing and greater freedom in all of it. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.